2018 was the last year that WWE was unopposed as a major force in the US wrestling world, as AEW would form the very next year. You would think this would result in a year of bad programming, as the company had no competition to give it a kick up the wazoo. In some ways this is true, as the booking was as turgid as usual, but the actual wrestling was pretty darn good. How good, I hear you ask? Let's find out. I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best WWE matches of 2018. Join us. Number 10, Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre versus Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose at Hell in a Cell. Hell in a Cell 2018 might have culminated with that Roman Reigns-Braun Strowman match that stupidly ended in a DQ, but at least there was some good wrestling on the show prior to it. Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, who were backing Roman as part of a Shield reunion, were facing off against Raw Tag Team Champions Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre, who were a part of Strowman's short-lived Dogs of War faction. Did you remember that that's what they were called? No, you didn't, you filthy liar. These four past and future world champions were given 25 minutes to play with, and they made every single one of them count. The action was just non-stop, full of twists and turns, and the result could have swung either way at any point. This was a reminder of how good tag team wrestling could be, as WWE had been neglecting it for the longest time. In the end, the Show-Off and the Scotsman retained their gold after McIntyre hit Rollins perfectly with a Claymore, whilst he had Ziggler up for a Falcon Arrow. Number 9, Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles at TLC. After over a year as WWE Champion, AJ Styles finally lost his crown on the November 13th, 2018 episode of SmackDown, after Daniel Bryan turned heel by planting the Phenomenal One right in the gonads. Their big title rematch came at TLC in December. Bryan wasn't quite his full eco-maniac character yet, but he was still a thoroughly dislikable baddie, because when Bryan Danielson wants you to boo him, he will make you boo him. When Styles joined WWE in 2016, Bryan retired just a month later, depriving fans of the chance to see the two in action for what many thought would be forever. Now they had a proper pay-per-view singles match between the two, and it delivered in spades. Crisper than crisp and smoother than smooth, this pair of in-ring wizards cast their spell over the TLC audience, who were more than happy to be entranced. Though not the greatest match of all time, which these two probably could have had, this was still a masterful display of how this whole wrestling thing works from two of the best to ever do it. Bryan won, this time without kicking anybody in the balls. Good for him. Number 8, The Miz versus Seth Rollins versus Finn Balor at WrestleMania 34. WWE were very smart in the build to this triple threat at WrestleMania 34, as they let Intercontinental Champion The Miz sit on the sidelines whilst his challengers Seth Rollins and Finn Balor had excellent matches on Raw every single week. This is why they're worth billions of dollars. The big day finally rolled around, and this was the bout chosen to open the main show. That was 100% the right call, as it turned out to be one of the strongest opening matches in Mania history. Fans expected a lot from Balor and Rollins, not just because of their work with each other, but because they were two of the most exciting workers on the whole roster at the time. Miz, though several rungs down the ladder from the other two in some fans' eyes, added a new dynamic to the battle, one that mainly involved him being a knob and trying to steal pins. The action was fast and furious, with too many memorable spots to recount here. Rollins ended up hitting a curb stomp to Balor whilst he was on top of Miz, then drilled the champion with another finisher to pick up his first IC title. Number 7, the 7-man gauntlet on Raw. Most of the time, Raw is pretty formulaic. There are some matches, some promos, some video packages, about 8 billion commercials. Same old, same old. However, every once in a while, WWE will give us an episode of their flagship show that is completely unique. Case in point, the February 19th, 2018 edition, where nearly 2/3 of the show was taken up by just one match. The 7 men set to fight at the upcoming Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, Braun Strowman, The Miz, Finn Balor, John Cena, Elias, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns were put into a gauntlet match with Rollins and Reigns kicking things off. Rollins beat his former stablemate after a lengthy battle before upsetting Cena in the next section. Before Elias, of all people, eliminated him, Rollins had wrestled for 1 hour and 5 minutes, the longest single performance in Raw's history. As well as being record-breaking, this match was also just gripping to watch, as every time you thought it was going to end, it just kept going. This was a bold step for WWE to take, and it paid off perfectly, giving every guy a chance to shine and building serious momentum ahead of the Chamber. Number 6, Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey versus Triple H and Stephanie McMahon at WrestleMania 34. When The Rock and Ronda Rousey confronted Stephanie McMahon and Triple H at WrestleMania 31, little did we know that they were laying the groundwork for a match 3 years down the line. By the time Mania 34 rolled around, Rock looked a little different, wearing a singlet and calling himself an Olympic gold medalist. Oh wait, that's Kurt Angle. Silly me. Though maybe they didn't get their first choice, the authorities still went to battle with Rousey and a bald Attitude Era legend in Rowdy Ronda's first official match in WWE. And it was, in no uncertain terms, a delight. This was sports entertainment at its finest. 4 over-the-top characters going at it in a match where wrestling proficiency was a distant second to drama and entertainment. Rousey looked like a total beast in her debut, even going toe-to-toe with the H-Man at one point, before locking an armbar in on Steph to make her tap out in the only reasonable conclusion. Just a properly fun match that somehow outshone everything else on the card. This bout went a long way in solidifying Rousey's status as wrestling's new superstar. I'm sure that goodwill will last forever. Number 5, Becky Lynch versus Asuka versus Charlotte Flair at TLC. The SmackDown Women's Championship clash from TLC 2018 was just the 4th all-female pay-per-view main event in company history, and it felt completely natural that these gals take the top spot. Becky Lynch was defending her prize against Asuka and Charlotte Flair in a tables, ladders and chairs match. These 3 women were perfectly suited to this environment, as they'd all been in wars in the past, and they left no stone unturned in exploring this violent match type. Bodies, debris, bits of Asuka's face paints, you name it, it was flying everywhere during this chaotic clash. Tables were broken, ladders were leapt from, chairs were used for everything except sitting. This was a wild brawl with an equally wild finish. Ronda Rousey, who by this point was Raw Women's Champion, came out and cost Becky Lynch the match right as she had the belt in her grasp. This allowed Asuka to win her first main roster championship and set the stage for Rousey versus Lynch at the upcoming WrestleMania 35. Oh yeah, and Charlotte Flair too. I was hoping that if I didn't say anything, I might be able to retroactively get her pulled from the match. Number 4, Seth Rollins versus The Miz at Backlash. Remember that WrestleMania 34 opener we discussed earlier? Surely that was only good because Rollins and Balor were in it, right? Think again, pal. 1 month on from losing the Intercontinental title to Seth Rollins, The Miz fought the new champ one-on-one to open 2018's Backlash pay-per-view. The story was there, now these two just had to deliver, which is precisely what they did. The match's narrative was set up when Rollins tweaked his knee early on. Miz, like the well-manicured shark that he is, smelled blood and spent the rest of the fight targeting his foe's battered leg. This led to some seriously tight near falls, as fans genuinely thought the evil heel might use the valiant babyface's injury to his advantage. It is a tale as old as wrestling time, but it's a classic for a reason. Eventually, Rollins overcame his busted strut and pinned Miz to retain. An absolute blinder of a match, this was easily the best pay-per-view opener of 2018 and the best match of Backlash as a whole. That said, given that this was the show that featured that god-awful Roman Reigns Samoa Joe main event, the bar was relatively low. Number 3, the Men's Royal Rumble at Royal Rumble. The 2018 Royal Rumble pay-per-view marked the first time ever that women got given their own version of the titular match. The inaugural Women's Rumble was okay, and Asuka's win was definitely the right call, but there would be much better examples of the format in years to come. As for the menfolk, they knocked it right out the park. Perhaps spurred on by the fact that the ladies were getting the main events, the fellas pulled out all the stops to make their Rumble one for the ages. There were surprises ranging from NXT champion Andrade to the Hurricane, an all-timer Iron Man performance by Finn Balor, and a great Final Six that pitted WWE's past against its future. When all was said and done, it was Shinsuke Nakamura who left with the W after last eliminating Roman Reigns. That allowed him to go and challenge WWE Champion AJ Styles at WrestleMania 34. The fact that that match isn't on this list should tell you just how disappointing it was. Anyway, 2018 is easily amongst the best of all the modern men's rumbles and goes to show that a little friendly competition isn't always a bad thing. Number 2, Becky Lynch versus Charlotte Flair at Evolution. In a move that definitely wasn't an apology for them being banned from performing in Saudi Arabia, WWE gave their ladies their own exclusive pay-per-view in 2018. There were fun matches all around at Evolution, from an NXT Women's Championship defense to the Mae Young Classic final to Ronda Rousey versus Nikki Bella, but one bout stands head and shoulders above the rest in terms of quality. Off the back of her recent mannish shift in attitude, Becky Lynch defended her SmackDown Women's Championship against old rival Charlotte Flair, but this was no ordinary match. This was a last woman standing match. The horsewomen went all out in beating each other to a bloody pulp, spilling all over the place in one of the most chaotic matches of the entire year. The spot to end all spots came when Lynch leapt off a ladder to crash through Flair and one of the announce tables, a moment that would have seemed unthinkable in a women's match just a few years earlier. Becky might have retained, but this was a victory for female wrestlers and fans of women's wrestling everywhere. Number 1, Brock Lesnar versus Daniel Bryan at Survivor Series. Rumor has it that Daniel Bryan was initially scheduled to be squashed by Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam 2014 before his injury led to John Cena taking that position instead. 4 years later, the two finally got their match at Survivor Series, and it was so much better than anyone could have expected. It looked like fans of the American Dragon were in for a rough night as Lesnar beat him from pillar to post in this WWE Champion versus Universal Champion clash. But that just made it even sweeter when Bryan made his comeback using his greatest superpower, kicking dudes in the balls. Though deep down we knew that he was never gonna win, Bryan made everybody believed that he stood a chance of slaying the beast. His near falls were absolutely electric as fans bought into the slim possibility of him pinning Lesnar, only to have their hopes dashed once again with a crushing F5 that led to D-Bry's defeat. A masterful display of wrestling psychology between two performers at the top of their game, Lesnar vs. Bryan is one of the most unique WWE matches in history, which is what makes it as compelling as it is.